It's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process, how I make my comics, here with you live online every week. If you would like to get behind the scenes bonus videos, bonus live streams, bonus blog posts showing my creative process, you can subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/GERIMI. If you would like to check out some of my comic books, get a chance to read some free previews, you can go to comics.jeremy.net. There you can download PDF previews of comics from my current series, Morning Star, which is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven told as a Western. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comics, there's a collection of the first 4 issues of Morning Star, as well as my previous graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, on amazon.jeremy.net. Now, before we get into the live stream, there is also a little bit another venue where you can buy my comics. If you read digitally, issue 7 of Morning Star is the latest issue of my comic book, and it just went live on Comixology. If you go into the description for this video, you'll see a link there, or if you just go to comixology.jeremy.net, it'll link you straight to the page where you can download, where you can purchase the latest issue, Morningstar 7, on Comixology, as well as the entire series in single issue formats digitally. So for those of you living internationally, outside of the US, or people who prefer to read digital because you're running out of bookshelf space, you can go check it out right there. So that's it. Just wanted to give you guys a quick heads up. It just dropped on Comixology this past week. So brand new, fresh off the digital presses, as it were. All right, now on to the live stream. So we are continuing to work on thumbnails for Morningstar issue 7. See, I see some comments in the chats here already. Mighty Geek Studio says he loves the new cover. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Amara says she just broke her hand in 2 places and 2 fingers as well. Wow, that sucks. I'm sorry to hear it. I hope it wasn't your drawing hand. Either way, I hope that you're getting the medical care that you need and getting that taken care of. So what we've got here on the drawing board today, before I started doing the actual individual thumbnails, I made a stack of cards, and each one of these cards I drew just sort of a key image for each page of the issue. And sometimes I would draw multiple cards. Like I've got this one, I've got a different version. I've got 31, then 31B and 31C. Just working out all sorts of variations of what I wanted the main image to be for the thumbnail, because there's a lot that happens in this final issue. It's very story packed, it's very dense, and I really needed to be able to work and massage the pages and move them around to figure out what I want my final page count to be. Each issue is normally 24 pages. This final issue is actually going to be 40 pages, so it's an almost double-sized issue. So what I'd like to do before I sit down to my thumbnails is just lay out whatever the current set of pages I'm on, lay out those cards so I can kind of refer to them as I am drawing. So we're now down to the last 10 pages of me thumbnailing. And to be honest, I've been sharing live streams of me thumbnailing for so long. I'm not sick of the thumbnail process per se, but I do feel like I've been showing you guys the same thing for so long that I'm really looking forward to moving into lettering, into penciling, and then finally the inking stage. Well, final stage for me will be my digital gray tones. But I am looking forward to wrapping up the thumbnails just so I can start sharing the next step of the process. So where we are right now in the thumbnails is one of the characters, Gabrielle. She's basically the Archangel Gabriel, but I wanted there to be more female characters in the book. So Gabrielle is that character. And she's being attacked by the queen of the demons in this series. And she had started on the page before by the demons were just executing a bunch of angels. We're now in this final issue is pretty much the war in heaven between angels and Lucifer's forces of demons and rebel angels. So there's one part where a bunch of angels are down on their knees, and there's demons, some rebel angels that have guns to the back of the angels' heads, and they have them on their knees getting ready to execute them. Gabrielle shows up and from a distance she's able to shoot and kill one of the demons, but the queen sees her and is enraged and is charging her now. So in fact, let me grab from my my previous stack of thumbnails from the page before and show you. Oh, I see Aaron's in the chat. Hey, how's it going, man? Thanks for stopping by. Hope all's well with you. I hope all of you are having creative weeks and making progress on whatever your personal projects are. So what I was drawing yesterday, I'll bring this a little bit closer so you can get a better look at it. But anyway, basically, the queen of the demons, I call her Isbaal. It's kind of a bastardization of Isabel and Baal, the Babylonian fire god. But anyway, she comes charging towards Gabrielle, who already shot the larger demon that was stalking them. Oh yeah, well this is sort of the shot that the page starts with. It's just her kind of running with speed lines, very manga-esque. Then just a wider shot that's a little bit more of an overhead shot, so you can get a sense of the distance between the two and how quickly she's covering the distance. And then you just go to a shot, which you can't see any of the details here, but it's going to be sort of a horizontal tier where you're looking at her from below, but you're seeing bullets impacting her and her not stopping. And you see her continuing to shoot, the demon getting closer and closer, and her shooting. And then you've got, basically I'm just going right into the demon, grabbing her by the throat, lifting her off the ground. And what's going to happen here is that there's sort of a bright light that's shining to one side of them. And I'm just working out different versions of this pose, because what's going to happen is there's another creature, and basically treating them as seraphim, but they're basically like lions. Imagine winged lions with 6 eyes and a flaming skull. And what these creatures are is they were originally demons. And you find out through the course of the series that the demons were created by Lucifer, which, you know, kind of makes sense. But another archangel, Raphael, the healer of the group, actually found a way to transform these demons into basically healing the evil out of them. And when he does, they transform into these beautiful but terrifying flaming lion creatures. And one of those creatures kind of comes to Gabrielle's rescue at the end here. I see some more folks in the chat. I see Mighty Geek Studio says, if you make a special edition, include some of your thumbnails as a behind-the-scenes look at the creation of the book. Iron Rocks is in the chat. How you doing, man? Lego Studio says hello. He's got a link in there, the Ninja Spank test. I'm not sure what that is. I think that's we were talking about him posting a video that he's working on. So feel free to check his video. I'll repost it in the if that's the link that we're talking about, I'll repost it on the community page after the stream's over. Mara says, I'm out of work for 6 weeks because of her hand. Sorry to hear that. Jay King's in the chat. He says, what's good, people? A good day, you know, having to work, still keeping up. Yep. It is. It's tough staying committed to these long projects. So right now, what I'm experimenting with is simply just deciding what I want to be the focus in this shot, where there's going to be light. The way that I'm structuring this is that the end of this page is going to be this flaming demon creature kind of charging at the viewer, and you're going to see Gabrielle and the Queen of the Demons kind of getting the light shining on them from the side. And what I'm trying to decide is I can either compose this page so that you are looking at Gabrielle's face and the demon is holding her up in the air, and you're looking at the demon from the back. Or I can compose this shot where you're looking at the demon holding her up. Hang on, let me just draw this over here so it won't get as confusing. Or I can compose this shot with the demon looking at Gabrielle, holding her up. And I could still probably have Gabrielle's head turned a little bit so you get kind of a profile of her. But the point of me working out these different angles is that I could do this shot as a simple profile, and you see the profile of the demon. She's holding the archangel up by the throat. And it's a simple shot, but I wanted it to feel a little bit more dynamic. And so I just wanted to try and pose it such that you're seeing them more from one angle. You're seeing them more from either, you're either favoring one character's face or the other's face. Although even drawing this little thumbnail right here, I think what I can do is make it so that we're favoring Gabrielle, but make it so that it's not as much of a hard 3/4 back of the head, so that we're getting able to see some of the demon's teeth. But yeah, it's just a matter of deciding which I want to show. And I could have the light glow coming from the opposite side of the camera where we're at, but I really wanted to have the light coming from the right-hand side because the way the energy is moving in this page, the demon has been moving from left to right towards Gabrielle. So it kind of seems weird to have this other force that's going to strike the demon come from the same direction, like it's chasing her. I mean, it could be that it's coming from behind and sneaking up on her, but it seemed to make more sense to me narratively to have that creature jump in from the opposite side and intercede between this conflict. So that's the thoughts that I have in terms of me composing the shot and how I want this scene to play out. See a few more comments in the chat. American Swordfish is in the chat. Good to see you. Matt Fitz in the chat, and he says, I'd go with the face with the most shock. Well, that would probably be Gabrielle, particularly because, you know, she's the one that we're empathizing with. So I think that the shot I'm going to go with, and to be honest, in terms of working this out, that's pretty much what I have. Like, I kind of did a little asterisk. Once I'm certain of which shot I'm going to do, I'll actually put the number of which panel it is. But I still don't even know how many panels I'm going to have on this page, because what I did was this little diagram that's here at the top. What I tend to do a lot of times, I'll start with just a blank. About the proportions of an average comic book page. And I'll start, usually I will try to figure out, like, I'll divide it into 3 tiers, even if I end up changing that to make it like 2 tiers or 4 tiers, whatever. I'll start with that just as a beginning compositional device. And what I'll do is I'll try to figure out how is this page ending, and then I work backwards and fill in what's going to happen before until I get to an image at the beginning that either is a good establishing shot if this is a new scene, or that ties into the last image of the previous page. So I basically, every page I work on, I'm trying to reverse engineer it. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes the image that I have that's dominant in my mind is in the middle of the page, so I'm sort of working from the middle outwards. Sometimes the image I start with is the establishing shot, and then I'm sort of doing what you would traditionally imagine, working at the beginning and finding my way through to the end. But a lot, more often than not, I find that knowing what my last shot on the page is helps me construct the entire page towards building in that direction. And a minor thing that I was going to mention, usually I draw all of my thumbnails with a brush and pen. I usually use a number 2 round acrylic brush, and I use India ink, and I will actually do that so I keep myself in practice working with the brush when sometimes I may be thumbnailing for a couple months and I won't be inking for a good long time. So I like to do that for practice. That said, I recently started switching to using, this is a Pentel aqua brush. And I've shown you these before in the chat as a thing that I use as an alternate substitute to a brush pen, a regular brush pen, because they're easily refillable. But the thing I really like about these is that I haven't left the cap off for long periods of time, but they don't seem to dry out the way that a brush pen usually will if you leave the cap off. And I found specifically for live streams and for times when I have to start and stop thumbnailing. 'Cause it isn't just when I'm on the stream. Sometimes I'm watching TV while I'm doing thumbnails with my wife, or if I'm hanging out with some friends and I'll be drawing and then talking for a little bit. Point is I do a lot of drawing, then stopping to talk, and drawing and stopping to talk. And I find that it starts messing up my regular brushes, the brushes that I use for inking, if I'm not constantly refreshing them in water, rinsing them, and then dipping them back into fresh ink. And plus, the ink just sort of like sits in my little ink well to the side and starts thickening up. So I decided to switch to, for live streams, doing my thumbnails with this. And I fill it with fountain pen ink instead of India ink, because India ink will clog these brushes, fountain pen ink won't. Now, it's not as dark. You can tell that the blacks here, I don't know how much you can tell, but these aren't rich, like super dark blacks the way you would get from a non-refillable brush pen. But I feel like these, it serves the purpose, because I just want to get all the storytelling down. See a few more comments in the chat. I see Mighty Geek Studio says, as long as we can see the emotions of the characters, in reference to which angle to have the character. Art the Mars in the chat, good to see you. Matt Fitz says, I do the same, more or not, I suppose, I guess more or less. And I usually will put a note down here. All right, so I've figured out which angle I want to have that start at. I also try to put notes in here, just writing down which issue I'm doing and which pages I'm doing, because I have such a thick stack. Like, these are all of the thumbnails for the final issue. So it's a 40-page comic, and I've probably got about, even though I'm only on page 30, I'm guessing there's probably about, no, actually there probably are about 30 sheets here, but some of the pages are me doing several sheets that work out one page, and then some of them have like 3 pages on one. So it's a mix. It isn't necessarily a one-to-one. I will do a lot. What I just do is, you see that I've got a bunch of different versions of the same shot here. And it's really just me trying out different angles until I find an angle that I'm happy with. And even if I'm pretty happy with it, if I think, oh wait, this shot could be a little bit better, or maybe there's a different way of approaching it, I'll just draw a quick stick figure of it just to see. Because, you know, it costs me 5 minutes to think of a shot, to try out a shot that may make the book flow better. So I'm just putting some notes here at the bottom of the page. All right. So where this page left off was a tight shot on the previous page of Gabrielle shooting. And the image I have on my thumbnail is just her just grabbing her. And one of the things I wanted to have, and to be honest, I'm kind of rethinking it now, but originally one of the ideas I wanted to have was for her to grab Gabrielle and spit out all of the bullets that Gabrielle shot into the demon while she was hurting her. But I feel like that it feels a little bit, at first I just thought it was a cool sequence. But I think about how many times I've seen something like that with either Wolverine or Sabretooth. And the idea of a character who can heal getting shot with bullets and then spitting them out. I don't know. Maybe it feels trite, and I'm thinking about doing something else to show that. So maybe I won't even necessarily reference that and just stick with getting down to them actually fighting. Or maybe I will do something with the bullets that Now this would be interesting. This I have not seen, is to actually have her spit one of the bullets into Gabrielle's face. That might be an idea. So I don't know. I'm gonna play with those ideas and see how I feel about it. I do see a question in the chat. I see American Swordfish asks, "Where do you save your upcoming ideas?" And that's real simple. Google Docs. I sometimes I will have a just a Word document on my home computer, but I found that Google Docs is also easy for if I come up with an idea for a story, or if I have an existing story and I want to just edit it or just add bits and pieces, then I will, having it on Google Docs means I can do it from my phone if I'm out and about and I happen to think of, oh wait, this would be a good scene for this particular comic, or if I have a brand new idea for a comic. And I also use it for standalone images, things that are just going to be drawings or paintings. I find that if I were to sit down and thumbnail out all of the ideas I have for a particular piece of artwork, that might take me, it might take me a half hour to thumbnail all of that out. Whereas if I sit down and just write down all of the imagery that I want in that particular picture, I can just sit down and in 5 minutes write all of the images that I want in the drawing. And the difference is that when you're drawing and you're thumbnailing, you'll keep saying, well, no, this isn't right visually. That needs to go over here. You're trying to solve the logic problems that the drawing may present, the idea may present. And you'll spend more and more time drawing those ideas out. Whereas if all you want is to capture the concept, by writing down what you imagine the picture what you imagine the picture to look like, you can cut down to just spending a few minutes getting those basic details down and save the actual visual problem solving for when you have time to work on the drawing. So I use writing as a tool, almost as a sketching tool. For me, thumbnailing in words. That's what I call it. But I find it very handy for visual arts, just as handy for visual arts as I do for writing. So that is what I do for keeping track of my ideas, or saving ideas for upcoming projects. Let's see here. Amar says, same here. Google Docs, Google Drives work best for me. I can embed a chart using a Google spreadsheet. Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility there in terms of what stuff you want to add to whatever information you need to keep track of what you're planning. And it doesn't matter whether it's Google Docs, Evernote, Microsoft Office, whatever method you use. In fact, I'm curious to hear what everyone else does to keep track of their ideas, because Amar mentioned his. American Swordfish asked the question. MadFit says, I've done Dropbox for images and Samsung Notes for ideas. So yeah, guys, let's hear what are your different processes for tracking and capturing your ideas as you're creating, as the creative process never ends. You're always thinking up new ideas and got to store them somewhere while you're finishing the current idea. All right, I'm running out of space here, so I'm gonna have to grab a new sheet of paper. All right. And I'll come back to the chat in a second. I'm actually just sitting here kind of thinking about what images I want to use for this shot. What is the compelling piece of storytelling that I'm doing from the time that the demon grabs her to the time of, like, because I figure the demon grabs her and the first thing the demon does is lift her up in the air. Well, in my notes here, I have that Isbaal, Queen of the Demons, slashes the gun from her hand. So maybe that might be a nice dramatic shot. And I'm trying to be conscious of things that, this character's behavior is very Wolverine-like. She's a demon with long claws, you know, and a temper. So there's a lot of slashing and fighting, and I'm trying to walk the balance between using the visual language that a character like, you know, a Wolverine or a Ripclaw from Cyberforce, like their type of fighting style and their body stances and how you expect a character to look like that. I'm trying to walk the balance between something that feels like that's how that character would move without necessarily saying, oh, we've seen this shot or this move 100 times. So I guess it's sort of like when authors talk about the idea of delivering on the tropes of the genre versus doing something that's trite and cliche. And when you're dealing with any character, I mean, that's a challenge, is how do you do something that is familiar yet unique? And this is just one little, you know, sequence or shot. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna put so much thought into this and this has to be the most innovative way for a character to slash the gun out of someone's hand. It's just something that I try to keep in the forefront of my mind at all levels of storytelling. Thumbnailing, dialogue, inking. What can I do to make this feel familiar yet unique? And so I guess right now what I'm playing with is the idea of the demon slashing Gabrielle's hand, like basically knocking her hand down, but with the gun going flying. Maybe some blood pouring out of her hand, ripping through her gloves. And honestly, that's something that I can now key into. When I say key into, what I mean is an action that I can draw, that I can work this panel around. Because, mind you, I didn't really, in my thumbnails, the whole thing is just the demon grabbing Gabrielle. That's what I have in my current thumbnail. But the idea of having her hand getting slashed and having the gun knocked out, that is a simple action that can be described in one panel. And having that to focus on makes it easier for me to say, all right, what is the clearest way to depict that event happening, and in a way that carries the flow, that both flows from the previous page and flows into what's going to happen on the rest of this page. So having that action to focus on helps me out. And again, it's all just stick figures and thumbnails. And this, again, I've mentioned this before. This is one of the other reasons I'm looking forward to moving past the thumbnails, because for me, I'm curious, I've asked you this before, how compelling it is to watch all of these little stick figures, because I am ready to get on to drawing the actual book. I am excited about it. I've been doing these thumbnails for so long that now I'm, you know, I'm ready for the next phase. So now I think I might do a couple of quick thumbnails of just comparing to, if the shot of the previous page was sort of like this shot but a tighter one, then I guess what I'm imagining is what's happening. Like, is her hand getting knocked away above her, losing the gun? Is it getting knocked downward? And all these sketches are meant to be is the head, the arm, and I haven't even really worked out what the torso is doing yet. But yeah, these are just me doodling to figure out where this is going next. And I have been chatting for a moment. Meanwhile, you guys have been in the chat. So let me go back up and revisit the chat here, see where we left off. Let's see here. Oh, we were talking about collecting ideas. J. King mentioned the thought pad. And Amar said, if it's awake, I think he means if I wake up during the night, not taking any software in my iPad or Samsung tablet or phone. And on the computer, Google Docs, Word, LibreOffice, Scenarist, or the new Windows 10 sticky notes. MadFit says it's more than stick figures, gesture drawing to maintain dynamic movements and flow. Yes, very true. I would say that these are probably, when I get to the point of what I think my thumbnail is, what I'm going for is a compelling gesture drawing. So it's still very loose, very rough. Like, this is the level of detail most of my thumbnails have. So you can see what the character's face is. You can get a sense of the limbs, what the major parts of the body's doing. You know, a little circle to kind of depict the energy, not energy, but the shot, the blast of the gun. Let's see here. Like on this page before it, like I had mentioned that there's a bunch of demons that are executing angels. This one here, this is the demon queen, and she's basically has an angel by the throat. And I didn't even really clearly draw her arm that's foreshortened grabbing this guy, but she's basically bending him backwards. So we're looking at him from the back, but he's bent over backwards so that now his head is facing us. He's got one hand kind of reaching out, you know, either to try and hold her off or for mercy. Meanwhile, she's like ripping out his guts. These are the kind of things, like, this is probably the most detailed my thumbnails get. So again, very, very rough. And, you know, in terms of facial expression, you know, you can see it's a guy with his mouth open and he's screaming. Usually I will only bother to go in and draw detailed faces if I really need to make note of what that expression is. Or sometimes I'll do a small picture on the side. It's just a close-up of the person's face. And I will note in my notes, this is the face for this panel. But the reason why I don't get too detailed in the thumbnail stage with the faces is because, you know, as you know, with faces or hands, things that are challenging to draw, you can get really caught up in that. And then I'll just be sitting here drawing portraits instead of focusing on the storytelling, which at the thumbnail phase, I'm working out all of the storytelling. Because you're going to watch me over the next few months redraw all of this in pencils. So it's all going to get redrawn. I'll take photo reference where necessary. I'll use little figures posed for the character poses when I need to work out proportion and and adjust the character poses to the actual panel a little better. So all of the detail that goes into the proper drawing of the comic page, all that's going to come later. In this, it's all about me working out the story. Working it out in a rough, very rough fashion. And in fact, me flipping back and looking at those previous pages, I can almost start. So this is what I mean when I mention that while I like to start the end of a page and work backwards, that in reality I tend to jump around a lot. Now what I'm doing is I'm going back to that thumbnail that's on the previous page, this thumbnail. And even though I have it on the sheet, actually, you know what? I don't really need to draw it yet. But what I'm trying to do is say, if this is the shot that came right before what I'm drawing now, what's happening? What would be the instant after this? So let's say the demon is here and she's knocking the gun out of her hand. This could be a strong. Let me get her torso. This one is actually too big. Let me go a little bit smaller. So let's say, and let's focus on her torso. In fact, I might be thinking of it in the wrong way. I was originally trying to have her hand knocked to the right to continue actions moving from left to right. But instead, it might make sense to have her gun knocked out of her hand to the left side of the panel. So very simple stick figures. Very horrible foreshortening in that hand. Then let's see. Let's imagine the demon's hand sort of crossing, almost like two swords crossing. And then the gun flying out. And the reason why I tend to do so many thumbnails is because I look at this little sketch I did there, and it's promising. It's promising as a composition. Doesn't mean it's the right composition. Just means so far of the stuff that I've been thumbnailing and doodling here, that one's probably the most promising. I am very much a trial and error thumbnailist because sometimes I do have the exact pose in my head and I just see it as a movie and watch it play out. But a lot of times it really is, this could go so many different ways. And I just keep trying, you know, just keep experimenting, playing with different angles, different versions of the same action until I find something that really says what I want it to say. So that idea of the hands crossing like swords, that appeals to me. So let's say that I make this arm a little bit longer just so that I can put the demon's head far enough away that it's not interfering compositionally with the with Gabrielle's arm. She has this long, black, thick hair, so it's going to take up a big compositional space behind her. And when I'm thumbnailing, something I noticed is that I will draw in what I think the page should be compositionally, and then I'll realize I tend to crop stuff really, really tight. And I like this box as just to help me with my composition in terms of figuring it out. But obviously, if I want to have the hand completely exposed, then it means this panel just needs to be a little bit taller. So I'll just raise that up there. There'll be room now for some dialogue if I need it. I tend to be pretty quiet dialogue-wise during fight scenes. I try to keep the sentences short and clipped because I'm like, they're fighting. They're breathless. They're not going to be sitting here having long monologues. Sometimes it is necessary from a storytelling point, but I'd like to have dialogue generally feel as naturalistic as possible in any given scene, which means that when people are fighting, in my books, I have them talk less. Now, mind you, Chris Claremont made an entire career off of having characters giving soliloquies during fight scenes. And God damn it, he makes it work, and it's beautiful. I'm no Chris Claremont. So I make do with what I can. So, and the way I drew this hand here with the hand moving forward, I already feel like if I wanted this energy to actually feel the way it should, then this hand should be coming turned more up, palm up, like it's ripping through. Put the thumb on the outside. The hand, basically the hand ripping upwards as it's striking. that will feel more like the energy that I want this page to have than some droplets of blood. Actually, you know what? I wouldn't put the droplets of blood on the claw. What I would do instead is to have the blood ripping from her hand. Like just, and not like a ton, just a little splatter to show that she hit her hard. Gabrielle is wearing gloves and she ripped through the gloves. So there's more drops of blood in here than would actually be in the real page. What I would really do in the actual page is just a couple of strands to just show, because I will put strike or impact lines in some pages, but what I like more often than not is just to draw without that and imply the visual impact with physical things, blood or debris, to kind of imply that. So, gotten a little bit of a ramble. Let me run back to the chat and see what's going on with you guys. Let's see here. Amar said that he meant taking notes, any note-taking software on his tablet, or he's multitasking, so that note was really bad. I know it's tough to keep track of stuff when you're multitasking. American Swordfish says, how do you treat an issue or chapter of your comic that contains pure dialogue in, and no action at all? How do you make it entertaining? Well, one, I have yet to write a book that's pure dialogue and no action. So I haven't done that. And I do think it is possible to make that entertaining. Oddly enough, well, first I'll give you my answer, and then I will give you a reference. What you want to do is, let's say you've got a chapter of your book and it's very, very heavy, dialogue heavy. What I would try to do is because I'm all about the numbered list, make a list of 1 to 24. Now, you know what all of your dialogue is. Act as if you were telling the exact story, but there is no dialogue. If you have two characters having an argument, then write whatever it is that starts the argument. Let's say it was something that another character did. Maybe they hold up a physical object that relates to that character. And let's say the person they're fighting about, maybe it's a picture. They hold up a picture of this other person. The other character that's arguing about him, one character feels positive about the character, the one negative. The other character knocks that picture frame out of their hand. Now the next part of let's say whatever happens with the argument, normally what I imagine is some way that either they're going to have a physical conflict or one character is going to walk away. Now, because this is a very dialogue-heavy thing, I imagine it's not about them punching or doing stuff like that. So a character turns tail and walks out the door, slams the door behind them. Then what happens? Well, the argument's not over, so the other character follows them. Character walks out now, and you could say, instead of having the dialogue they would have, maybe they step out on the street and the person's gone, so they get mad, they pick up the character's cell phone and they call him on the cell phone. The other character is walking away somewhere else in the city, and they're like, now they're having the argument on the phone while the one character's walking, the other one's walking. And then you have them arguing on the phone while they're both walking around the city, one character trying to get away from the other, not in a chase scene, but more of just, I'm mad at you, I don't want to see you right now, but they're still fighting on the phone. And then you may have a page or two of them walking through the city, arguing and yelling, and people reacting to them and moving out of their way because you're like, wow, these people are both so pissed. Or maybe one of the characters is a real jerk and kicks a dog as they walk because they're so angry. Or somebody like asks them for money and they shove them aside, whatever. The point is act like you don't have even if your story is all dialogue, that particular chapter, act as if you do not have dialogue to use. Act as if you're writing a silent movie. What are the things that happen that would convey this argument that the characters are having without dialogue? Then come back in and layer your dialogue over on top of that, and maybe you tweak it now to add in someone to incorporate some of the nuances that you figured out visually. But the point is that comics and film are not the same. You can do things in comic books that you cannot do in film. Same way you can do things in film that you can't do in comics. But What you can do, but the thing they both have in common is that they are visual storytelling mediums. Much like you can watch a film with the sound turned off and still figure out what's going on, if you have a really dialogue heavy scene, give the characters interesting things to do while that dialogue is happening. In fact, maybe what your approach should be is maybe you create physical events that they're engaging in that are in direct contrast to what they're arguing about or what they're talking about, because it doesn't, I'm just using an argument as a starting point because it's conflict and conflict makes for good story. But even if it's characters that are reminiscing about something, or they're grieving, or they're having a deep emotional conversation, maybe you can have them having this emotional conversation while they're walking through a beautiful park with kids playing, or they're walking through an amusement park in a Ferris wheel while they're talking about something really horrible and heart-wrenching and sad. Maybe they're walking through a petting zoo while this couple is talking about, like, maybe they had an infant child that passed away, and they're talking about that being while they're surrounded by children, and it's gut-wrenching and it has an emotional impact to it. So what I would advise is to try and find visual stories that either complement or contrast what the dialogue is, and then tell a visual story that will go along with that dialogue. That's how I would approach a very dialogue heavy or dialogue driven chapter. So, and I see Daniel Williams in the chat. Daniel says, while we're close to the subject, I want to write and illustrate a graphic novel without sacrificing description and prose. Do you think this can be done? Any recommendations? Wait, before I answer your question, I had one more thing for American Swordfish. If you have Netflix, it's not on Netflix, it's on Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, there is a movie on there that you can watch for free called Destination Wedding. I just watched it last night on the recommendation of my friend Vince Moore. And he recommended it because it's a great dialogue-driven romantic comedy, but it's a very dark romantic comedy in the sense that they're two very cynical, unpleasant people, and they're forced to be stuck together during this entire wedding, and it's about how their relationship evolves when you've got these two miserable people that are stuck with each other. But my wife pointed this out to me, in the entire film, it's Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder. And in the entire film, they're the only two speaking roles. It's just them talking to each other. There's other people around, there's other people they interact with, but the only people that they speak to are each other. Now, the film, I found it very entertaining, but it's just dialogue. Now go watch that movie, and if you want, watch that movie once through, and then go through and watch certain scenes with the sound turned off, and see how the characters are conveying the story even without dialogue. That's visual storytelling, and that's what you want to do. You want to make what's happening to them, because you could listen to the movie Destination Wedding like an audio play, like a drama. You sit there and listen to it. It plays like a radio drama. It plays like a stage play. But they do make it visually interesting and compelling in terms of how the characters are interacting, even when there's much dialogue. So that's the reference that I wanted to give you. And the reason why I mentioned reference is because now, in going back to Daniel Williams' question, Daniel, I am not sure how familiar you are with the comic creator Matt Wagner. He created a comic book called Grendel. He has a series that he also self-published called Mage. As well as he's done multiple Batman projects that are really, really cool, including a Batman Grendel crossover. He's done some Batman Two-Face stuff. He had a great series that he wrote and another artist drew for Vertigo Comics, the now defunct Vertigo Comics, called Sandman Mystery Theater. Just giving you a bit of background on his work, but he's a fantastic writer artist who has written and illustrated books. He's also written books for other people. I'm not sure how many books he has drawn that other people have written. He may not have done that. I am not sure of that. But the reason why I bring up Matt Wagner is specifically because of the first volume of Grendel called Devil by the Deed. And it is a comic that goes back and forth between comic book storytelling and pages of prose, and then pages of prose with illustrations running along the side. So yes, it can be done, and I would recommend looking at Grendel, Devil by the Deed. That is a good one to check out. It's not new and unique to comics. There's lots of people that have done illustrated novels where it's just text and illustration, or they'll do text and illustration with mixes with chunks of prose in it. I have trouble thinking of other examples off the top of my head right now. The Grendel example is the one that jumps to the top of my mind. And in fact, for other people that are comic creators in the chat, if you can think of, believe me, I wish Vince was on this channel, my buddy Vince Moore, because if he was on here, Vince could easily rattle off a bunch of recommendations. But for anyone else who can think of visual storytelling that's similar to Matt Wagner's first Grendel, Devil by the Deed, like other things where it's a combination of prose and comic storytelling, please throw those out in the chat. So yes, it can be done. And honestly, I think the biggest thing, the best way to tackle it is to make a rough draft of it. Figure out how long you want the story to be. Figure out how much of it you want to be prose versus illustration. Write and make a really crappy version of it. The same way that I draw all these things here. Basically sit down and let's say it's going to be a 100-page novella. Maybe you sit down with or actually, you know what? The thumbnail cards. Sit down on a bunch of note cards, lay out 100 note cards, draw pictures on one, draw, pick a picture on one card, prose on another, and just go through and just write, all right, let's say that one page is going to be a paragraph describing the character's origin story or introducing or describing the character. You may just write character description on that note card. Then you might have picture and just say, or image, and you might have whatever they do, them fighting somebody or them meeting somebody else, something that might contrast well instead of just doing a picture of what your prose is. You may also decide that you want your picture that's on the facing page to be an illustration of one particular aspect that's in the prose. But since you're going to be using prose and images, I find it's probably a stronger idea to use the images to describe things that would take a long time to do in prose, and use the prose to describe things that would take a long time to tell in pictures. Use each other's strengths to complement each other. So that is something that I would try for doing a combination of prose and comics. So let's see here. Back into ye old thumbnail. You know what? I am always amazed at how quickly the time goes by when we're talking. We're already at 53 minutes. So we're down to, probably the last 10 minutes of the live stream. I'll thumbnail here a little bit more, and then I'll check the chat before I log out and respond to any other questions you guys have. And Daniel said, thanks, beautiful. I'm happy to help. That's what I'm here for. I am happy to share anything that's useful to other creators. I'm glad to be of service. So let's say that the gun that I drew up here gets slashed out of Gabrielle's hand. Gabrielle I very much designed her to be one of the toughest characters in this book. So just because her hand gets slashed, she's not giving up without a fight. So I'm imagining that she's going to at least take a punch at the Demon Queen before this fight gets, before she ends up getting held up by the throat. So I want this to be compelling. I'm trying to think. Maybe she kicks her. Kicks her in the face. Now see, here's the thing. I don't know whether a kick in the face is really the way that I want to go. But that's a lot of the time how when I tell you to just try stuff or do a rough draft, this thumbnailing is all rough draft for me. I thought of kick in the face. Doesn't mean that it's the right move. I'm just thumbnailing it to see how it looks, because the fact that I even thumbnailed out, that I'm even roughing out this idea, may help me figure out what the right one is. And that kick is a little bit too ballet kick and not enough like Street Fighter-y kick. I think if anything, I would have her torso bent back a little bit. I put her torso a little bit too far forward in that thumbnail. And again, these are things that aren't super important in the thumbnail stage. Maybe draw Isbaal's head bent back now. It still feels like too much of a repeat of the previous panel, only in that I've got their... It's not that their hands can't still be crossed, but I want to convey this sense of continual movement. The sense that, much like I want this panel to be a progression from this panel, I would like the next shot to be a progression from this to this one. So, and this is a reason why, again, thumbnailing something, even if I don't think it's the right decision, is useful, because I can simply look at this sketch that I did and I can say, all right, what do I need to do to make this shot, this current shot, feel different from this one? Although true, I've changed it as well. Now it's the foot crossing instead of the foot crossing her instead of the fist crossing her. But I do still want there to feel like there's a progression. And I guess the main thing is that I don't want it to just be like the Demon Queen has just walked up and just whooped up on Gabrielle, because again, one of the toughest characters in the series. I mean, the way I kind of planned this, back before Lucifer turned evil, it was sort of like Lucifer was the leader and he was the most powerful. Michael was the next most powerful as his second in command. And then Gabrielle's almost like, she's kind of like in the movie Black Panther, when you look at like all like his sister, the royal guard, the queen, you look at all these badass women and you're kind of like, what do they even need a king for? In this way, like, Gabrielle is almost like the one who, at times, you wonder, like, why isn't she the leader? Because, Lucifer very much starts off as the leader, but starts going to the dark side. Or rather, letting the darkness within him out, as you'll see in the climax of the story. Michael is kind of a goody two-shoes, but he's his best friend, and Gabrielle is sort of like the no-nonsense tough one. So I really want, when this fight happens, it's a fight that, yeah, Gabrielle's going to end up needing help, but I want it to feel like she's not just a pushover. And now I'm kind of making a mistake that I tend to call other creators out for. Like sometimes when people ask me about ask me for storytelling advice, I try not to have characters when they're acting to show them from the back. I try to tell people, show characters from the front, show their facial expressions. And that might be one change I need to make right there to differentiate this panel from the next one, is that this image of Gabrielle getting the gun knocked out of her hand favors Gabrielle. Maybe the next shot needs to favor the Demon Queen. American Swordfish chimed in. He said, Gabrielle is like the storm of your group, and Lucifer is like the Cyclops. Well, you know what? Lucifer in my story is like the Professor X before he goes turns into Onslaught. That's really probably the more accurate. And then I guess Michael does end up going. So I forgot the Cyclops also turned evil, so that's not necessarily a bad comparison. I guess Michael would be more like Cyclops if Cyclops never went evil. And Gabrielle. Yes, Gabrielle is kind of the storm of the team. That's a really great comparison. To be honest, I wish that this were being made into a TV show or a movie, because the actress Ruth Negga on Preacher, she not only looks exactly like I imagine Gabrielle looking, but she also the role that her version of Tulip on Preacher. I know a lot of people were kind of upset that she wasn't like the blonde girl that was in the comic, but I love her version of Tulip because her version is so much more flawed than the one in the comic. She's just so messed up. But I like that character. Imagine that character without being a criminal. That's Gabrielle. Like her mannerisms, her no nonsense, like does not take shit from anybody. That's Gabrielle in this book. So I wish that it was happening now and that she could play the character. That would be awesome. And American Swordfish also said, "Love that actress. Isn't she on Shield?" That I don't know. I have not watched. I presume you mean Agents of Shield, and not the FX TV series. But I have not watched Agents of Shield since the first season, so I have no idea who's on there, what's going on. And that's not a diss on the show. It is purely the fact that I watched the first 3 episodes. I didn't have time to stay up with it, and I just, there's other stuff that obviously I've been watching Preacher, but, there's only so many hours in the day. And that's the big sacrifice that creators need to make. You need to decide, do I want to do I want to consume content, or do I want to make content? That's the big challenge. And I try to put as much of my spare time as possible towards making things. Because I think thumbnailing is probably the most interesting phase for me in terms of internally. But so much of it is me working out the potential of the story as opposed to you actually watching an illustration get drawn. And so I'm looking forward to getting onto that. But, if I had more hours in the day, I'd be farther along. Let's see. Yes, both Swordfish and Amar commented that Ruth Negga was on season 2. And he says Amar says it was early on. She's no longer there, and he also says you can do it as a 2D or 3D animated movie. Here's a little funny thing. I used to do Flash animation in the early 2000s. I was doing animation, and I did the whole thing, like each chapter was about 3 minutes long, so the whole animated film was a short story that ended up being, because I thought it was really hard to get a leg up in comics. I didn't really think I was necessarily going to... It was before I really got into self-publishing or knew much about self-publishing, and I kind of thought, well, no one's ever going to hire me to make comics, so maybe I'll just go and make animated films instead, because I can make those, share those on the web. And this was also before webcomics really took off. But in the time it took me to make that 9-minute animated film, it took about 2 years to make a 9-minute... Whether I'm doing 3D or 2D, in the time it takes for me to do 2 to 4 issues of a comic, less than 1 issue's worth of animated film in terms of the actual story. So I love animation. Who are better at it can do it quicker, faster. more efficiently. I would honestly really at a faster speed than I can make it in any other medium, and with the maximum amount of creative control. So I leave it to you to continue to animate, Amar, and I look forward to seeing your animated films as you produce them. So we're pretty much at the all you guys hanging out with me over the weekend. Spend some time while I'm writing and drawing comics. Again, one more quick reminder before we're out. If you read comics digitally, if you are on Comixology, Morningstar issue 7 just dropped on Comixology. There is a link in the comments for this video. Please click on that, head on over. You can buy the entire series, all 7 issues. I appreciate you guys supporting my work via, or actually, you know what? Here, I'll just go ahead and answer him real quick. He mentioned for all those frames you did in those 2 years, you could have repurposed for your books as well. I could have, but as opposed to repurposing frames, I'd rather just draw the comic frames. So I'm not saying as I am about comics. I think that people that enjoy doing animation should make animation. People that enjoy doing both should do both. My desire to not do it is just because I don't want to. So that's all. It's just a different thing. If I wanted to be a filmmaker, I'd be a filmmaker. If I want to be an animator, do the best on your films. Ian Rock says best wishes. Amar says thank you for the stream and the sharing. Daniel says peace. Thank you. I appreciate it. In addition to my comic being on Patreon, on Comixology, I'm also running Morningstar as a webcomic on my Patreon. So it is released. I'm releasing them in 5-page chunks every week, and they're released a month early for Patreon subscribers. So even if you're not a Patreon subscriber, you can go and you can read pages on my Patreon account for free, but subscribers get them a month early. So go to patreon.com/GERIMI. I do a monthly bonus live stream, so it's like this, but just with fewer people, a little bit more intimate, sharing more of the creative process. Also additional Patreon exclusive blog posts on there showing my creative process. So again, patreon.com/GERIMI. Download some preview pages for free, comics.jeremy.net, and purchasing physical copies of my comics, amazon.jeremy.net. Sorry, it's been a long day. My brain's a little wonky. Amazon.jeremy.net. That's it.